All right, so for our second video, for the first part of our race and ethnicity discussion, I would like to set out some definitions of terms like prejudice, discrimination, and racism, and also introduce you to anti-racism as well. So, prejudice is defined as an attitude, and specifically, it's an attitude that is negative towards an entire group of people. And prejudice is typically reinforced by racism or the belief that one race is superior to others. Prejudice also leads to something called a stereotype, which is an unreliable generalization about all members of a group. Stereotypes create social meanings that are attached to individuals and that can actually develop real consequences for the individual. Assumptions are made about entire groups of people. And so that means that, all of the members of that group are viewed as a monolith or viewed as being the same. And so if they don't identify or don't reflect those assumptions, then it can be problematic. And if they do, it can also be problematic, like leading to a stereotype threat or, the fear that you might actually exemplify a stereotype. Discrimination, on the other hand, is a behavior and the active denial of opportunities or rights to either an individual or a group that's based on either arbitrary reasoning or prejudice. So, when it comes to discrimination and prejudice, prejudice is an attitude, discrimination is a behavior. And while they can and often do go hand in hand, they also don't necessarily have to. And so if you look at the diagram or the image that's being shown here, you can see that there are different types of prejudice discrimination connections. You have an active bigot, so someone who is prejudiced and discriminates. But then you also have a timid bigot who is prejudiced but doesn't discriminate. Can you think of any reasons why someone might be prejudiced but not discriminate? So you're probably already, thinking perhaps someone who wants to serve customers because they want to make money, but they don't like certain groups of people, right? Um, so yeah, that would be the perfect example. You have the fair weather liberal, somebody who discriminates, but they're not prejudiced. So similarly, this might be someone, if we're using the same example, who um, doesn't want to discriminate. They don't have any hard feelings or prejudiced beliefs about someone, but they do it anyway, usually as a protective measure for themselves. So if we're thinking about, during Jim Crow era, civil rights movement in the United States, someone who has up a no colored sign, no colored allowed sign, or won't allow people to eat inside their restaurant, even though they would not mind that business, but does so just so that they are not attacked themselves. And then you have the all weather liberal, which is someone who neither discriminates or is prejudiced. Um, and unfortunately, we don't have a ton of people that fall into that category. Honestly, in many different areas, not just looking at race or ethnicity, many people have prejudices and sometimes we discriminate. And discrimination isn't necessarily always racist. If you read the book, How to Be an Anti-Racist by Ibram X. Kendi, there's a really good outline. And so sometimes there's positive discrimination where you're discriminating in order to help out a group that has been treated unfairly or disadvantaged um, in some way. Another really cool thing that we get from How to Be an Anti-Racist, or HTBAA, as I have acronymed it, is racism versus racist. And in sociology, we would typically say that racism is uh, more of an institutional or uh, more of an institutional or structural discrimination event, and that racist could be about an individual, or it could be about prejudice or anything like that. And so I really do like how Ibram X. Kendi kind of flips that script and says that racism is about this structure, right? Because racism, he says that it isn't something an individual can do, that it's something that happens within a group, right? And so you have power, policy, and ideas. It's structural, it's institutional, it's plural. And then he says for racists, this could be a power move, or a powered like entity, a policy, or an idea. And it's more about individual or singular events. So an individual can be racist, but a group of people can engage. So I'm leaning on Kendi a bit more here, for this idea of anti-racism. Basically, he says that the whole concept of the book, Anti-Racist, says that there's a problem with being not racist, that you can't just say, I'm not racist, right? There's no in between space here. And so that means you're either racist or anti racist. Because, as I have written here, being not racist isn't the same as fighting racist ideas in politics, right? Being not racist isn't the same as being anti racist. And being not racist provides racial policies or racist policies and racist ideas with a neutral gray area to hide in. And so that's the main point. Getting rid of this, well, I'm not racist kind of rhetoric means that you can't hide in a neutral area, right? And in the fight against racism, there are no neutral areas. Either you're in or you're out. Either you're racist or anti-racist. I should have flipped those. I often confuse the terms because anti usually means negative connotation. And so instead, Kendi talks about anti-racism, and we'll go into that in a moment. So I really like this slide a lot. Anti-racism, or an anti-racist idea, is any notion that suggests that racial groups are equal in cultural standing, and that policy should be focused on creating racist equity and justice. However, an assimilationist idea is any notion that assumes that a group or race of people is culturally inferior and attempts to rehabilitate their customs, their traditions, and behaviors, or attempts to impose one's own culture on others. And so, assimilationist ideas, for example, would be if you were looking at Native Americans who were sent to um, these assimilationist schools and boarding schools throughout North America, and were kind of taken away from their families and forced to kind of abandon their culture and their spirituality, their language, and their customs. Segregationist attitudes, however, are notions that suggest that a racial group is permanently inferior and that justifies policies and practices that aim to kill, terrorize, incarcerate, or separate that group, right? And so I like this clarification of these terms, so that you can see that those variations of not racist are actually all racist, and that there's only one anti-racism.